They said it was just a movie. They said that the screams were acting. But what if the horror that haunted that set never left? And what if I told you that those fake skeleton remains were in fact real? Welcome to Freaked Out with your psychic medium host, Liz. Today, guys, we are back for spooky season, and of course, we're going to be covering the Poltergeist movie. It is so weird. I'm going to be dropping a video here in a few minutes, but I need to explain. A few months ago, I came up with my list of what I had planned to do. I was looking for a doll to channel Heather O'Rourke, and I couldn't find anything. And then, literally last week, I was talking to Landon about my Poltergeist movie and how I had run into issues with not finding a doll to channel her a little bit better. And then I started scrolling on Marketplace and I came across this doll. So I've been looking for a doll to channel Carol Ann, aka Heather O'Rourke. So I happen to be having a lot of things surrounding the Poltergeist movie coming to me, which I will share in this video I am making. But look, so we all know what Carol Ann looks like from Poltergeist. So look at this doll. You ready? Oh my God, why are you upside down? That's creepy. There she is, Carol Ann. Now, I get some really ubery creepy vibes from her. She's actually a lot smaller than I thought she'd be. She even has like this comforter thing for like a bed, but this is Carol Ann. I'm telling you guys, there's something about this doll. Everything was super coincidental on how I got it, but we're going to be covering a lot of my haunted spooky dolls next episode, but we're glad Carol Ann has come to join us. Doesn't she look like Carol Ann? Resemblance much? I'd say so. And she came into our lives, and I'm so excited to share everything. Next week, we actually have a full episode set up for my haunted dolls, including a few new ones. So you'll get to listen and watch me try to channel her in that episode too. You will not want to miss this because it is intense, and Landon will be around for at least the channeling side of things. I cannot wait to share. And there's a few dolls on the way to us now too. And you're damn right, we're going to talk about them too. But anyways, she helped me out so much for this episode, and I cannot wait to get into it. I don't know if you guys are even aware of all of the things that happened with the Poltergeist movie, but I'm going to talk about it here. But before we get into the movie side of things, let's talk about this curse, because there is a genuine curse connected to a lot of the actors and actresses on that movie set. And a lot of people are still whispering about how that movie was technically not necessarily scripted. And I mean, yes, the movie itself was scripted, but they didn't anticipate all the horror that came along with it. You might want to sage your screen for this one. So the Poltergeist, the movie, was released in 1982. It was directed by Tobe Hooper and produced and co-written by none other than Steven Spielberg. It would be considered the perfect suburban nightmare: a happy family, a nice house, and a TV set that becomes a portal for the dead. Can that happen, by the way? I think it can. I've never encountered it. Maybe like the old school TVs, the big boxy ones with the antennas. Absolutely. Nowadays, not so much, but who knows? our spooky spirits are still always working on new technology as well, figuring out ways to maneuver through it. So it's a very big possibility that that will happen one day. And then, of course, we all remember Carol Ann and her tiny little voice. They're here, becoming one of the most chilling lines in horror history. But the energy around this movie from the very first shoot was already strange. Now, cast members had talked about electronics like flickering. Crew members were claiming that there were some cold spots going on. And by the time the cameras had stopped shooting, people were going home and whispering to their family like, "I think something followed me home. Followed me home from work." And here's the part where things sent a chill up my spine. The famous pool scene where JoBeth Williams is covered in mud, screaming, as the skeletons are floating around her. You'd think it was like, Hollywood props, but no. Those were real bones. Now, let's just put this out here. Obviously, Poltergeist was not the only movie that had real bones on set because they wanted to make it as real as possible, especially Steven Spielberg. He was somebody who's like, we need to make this shit look as real as we possibly can. So it wasn't uncommon for practices like this to happen. But when you have a movie about evil entities, and you're constantly pushing that narrative, it's almost like it's going to wake something up. I keep seeing Indiana Jones and also some haunted items on that set as well, but we'll cover that another day. And people didn't die from the movie like people died from these movies. By the way, JoBeth did not find out until way later, and of course she was horrified, and that she didn't even realize that she had spent an entire day floating around in real life corpses for this movie scene. And it was like mixing life and death at the same time. And apparently the other reason that they didn't necessarily use, propped items is because the real bodies were a lot less expensive than fake props. Welcome to the 80s, folks. But here's what I'm thinking. Maybe save the cost. Maybe get the props just so that we're not messing with anything. These bodies were obviously handed over for scientific purposes, and/or that's where our bodies go. I'm pretty sure people wouldn't, well, maybe some might enjoy it. Now, apparently they got these skulls from a medical supply company, and one of the makeup artists back then was like, yeah, this was common practice. So I agree with that too. It wasn't unnatural, but like I said, bring in the horror, it's going to be problematic. And if I was JoBeth, I would have burned my paycheck, saged my tub, and moved to an entirely new zip code. Because once you've rolled around in a grave of human people, there is no amount of holy water to get that off of you. Those bones carry stories as well. Maybe some unfinished business. It almost wakes them up and remembers their old life and what's going on next. And I also want to point out, what happens when babies are born, right? They get hungry. Same with energy. There were crew members suggesting that somebody was watching them, or at least it felt that way. Cameras were jamming, which happens to me all the time talking about this stuff. Lights were flickering, and there was one stagehand that refused to go back on set, or at least into the soundstage room, until that scene was completely finished because they felt something bad. And here's the thing, the pool was built indoors on a soundstage at MGM. It wasn't an open air pool, it was enclosed, which means every bit of that energy, the panic, the screaming, all trapped in that room. No wind to clear it either, by the way. No sun to burn it off, just recycled fear. And entities, evil energy, feeds off of fear. And then, of course, there were the deaths that took place. And we're going to start with Dominique Dunne. Now, she played Dana Freeling, the sister in the movie to Carol Ann. She was 22 years old at the time. She was bright and talented, the kind of woman that you knew was going to go somewhere. Now, she played the teenage daughter who sensed something was wrong before it actually happened. And maybe that wasn't just a script, because what happened to Dominique was more than a tragedy. And honestly, although things like this happen day in and day out where somebody is abused by their partner, I really feel that when you're that kind of person, when you have that aggression and anger and evil inside of you, that you can beat your significant other or beat your children or hurt people in a devastating way, it is very easy for entities to grasp you. I believe that with Dominique constantly being on the set of this movie really brought that energy home, which in turn made her boyfriend a lot crazier. He was already crazy, but this just pushed it over the edge. Now, his name was John Sweeney, and he was technically her ex-boyfriend at this point. Like I said, he was already controlling, jealous, obsessive, and he had one hell of a temper, and he was hella jealous with her and her career because he wanted it to be about him as well. He had a temper that didn't just flash, it boiled as well. Now, friends did say that she had just recently broke things off with this fool, and she was trying to get away from the chaos. But that night, October 30th, 1982, he showed up at her West Hollywood home. They argued in the driveway. He then snapped and strangled her right there, basically until she lost consciousness. He left her lying unconscious. She was blue and motionless, and her neighbor found her, but it was a little too late. She spent 5 days in a coma before passing away on November 4th. Of course, the date is also very eerie. Spirits and entities can grab you a lot easier in October. I think June as well, but I mean, Halloween has a reason that the name is Halloween there. You know what I'm saying? I keep seeing like the dark vibrations like wrapping around his mind. It was like throwing gasoline in the mix. He was already a man teetering on the edge, and this just sent him. It was absolutely demonic. Now, Dominique, when I try to channel her energy, she shows me that about a week prior, she felt death looming. She didn't understand what was going on. She felt like it could be connected to her recent breakup, but this was like an intense situation. Dominique shows me that a week before it happened, she kept hearing voices. You're not safe. He's coming. He's coming. Like, what? You're going to die was also something she heard. She honestly thought it was trauma, but she had a bad feeling. And she shows me that she shared with her people that she was concerned that this man would take her life because she could see that darkness in his eyes. I honestly believe that Dominique's energy was already being targeted before we even got to her ex-boyfriend. I really feel like the energy surrounding those bones basically awoke during the filming of this movie and just latched on to anything and anyone it could, especially women, basically searching for cracks and things that they can maneuver through. And of course, John Sweeney, he already had a lot of cracks. Dominique also shows me she was standing in front of like a mirror before it happened. She was like brushing her hair, and she felt like there were eyes on her even before he did it. Now, a week before her death, she told someone that she felt off, like someone was trying to tell her something. I'm going to say it was her spirits trying to tell her, like, hey, get away from this situation. Dominique's energy today, thankfully, there is no demonic energy around her. She's very strong and protective and watchful, and she did not get caught up in that dark energy. But I believe douchebag will absolutely have a connection to this entity at some point for himself. But luckily, Dominique was able to get away from it. Now, that was the first death, and that took everyone by surprise. By the time Poltergeist 2 started filming, it was like it revamped it again. I can't believe they went forward to do this. Doesn't surprise me, but I still can't believe they did it anyway. Even knowing the risks, they probably chalked it up all to coincidence. Baby, there's never coincidence. It was also not about the ghosts anymore. It was about this entity, which I believe was getting darker and darker and still latched on to all these actors and actresses. So bringing them all back just made this thing strong yet again. Now let's talk about Julian Beck. You probably remember him as the thin, pale preacher who smiled like he already knew that something was waiting for you, basically on the other side. Reverend Henry Kane. He wasn't a monster with fangs. He was quiet, very polite, and somehow they made him very terrifying in the movie. Now here's the thing. Julian looked very terrifying, and he didn't even necessarily need the makeup. Why? Because he was already dying. He had stomach cancer while he took the role. His body was frail, his face was hollow, but his eyes, there was something about his eyes. Even in the footage, you could feel it. It's like he sees through the camera and not into it. Like he's already between, two worlds, which I've talked about in the past and very possible. And he claimed to use his role to make peace with what was coming. But what he didn't realize is that I believe there was something connected to him and this movie based upon this entity to kind of push this stomach cancer to a heightened place. The cameras had a hard time focusing on him sometimes. Production had mentioned that there were certain pieces of video that were distorted and blurry, as if the light around him was different somehow. I see him rehearsing one night, the preacher hat, the slow walk, the faint smile, and I also see a shadow behind him. And it was not human. Like, it was long, almost kind of like a serpent. Ugh. And it was like curling behind his shoulders, like smoke in a sense. And when I hear what it's trying to tell me, I keep hearing the word, the collector. The collector. What the hell is that? When I looked it up, it's basically an entity's job to collect energy. But this specific entity is called the collector. So that means that he does it in an abundance? Yikes. Anyways, I feel like Julian's energy is a little bit intertwined with this entity. Something's just telling me they're connected, they're stuck to each other. Almost as if there's like a ball and chain connected to him. Whew. He died September 14th, 1985, before Poltergeist 2 even reached the theaters. I honestly don't even feel like his death was a punishment. It was more so like an exchange. And he wanted to be part of that, knowing he was going to die. But I really believe this entity pushed it quicker. Even after he passed, they say that the studio still felt a presence. But they kept going anyway. Editors reported voices on raw audio. I wish I had a clipping of that. So Dominique being the first, Julian was the gatekeeper. Now that brings us to Heather O'Rourke's passing. Now during the production and filming of Poltergeist 3, because apparently we didn't learn the first 2 times, Heather developed like flu-like symptoms, which in hindsight was likely related to an intestinal issue that later proved to become fatal. She was under heavy medication, cortisone injections, while filming the movie. And that was also because she was misdiagnosed as well. They believed it was Crohn's disease, which ended up causing her facial swelling, which was visible in some scenes in the third movie. Now, I believe that she was sick throughout a lot of these scenes, and that's why she passed away so quickly. We didn't get to see her throughout the whole movie. There was a lot of her moving around, laughing, that kind of thing, because they basically had to fill in all the pieces to continue to carry on, because that's what they thought she would want. In my opinion, I don't think it's what she wanted. Her illness was off and on, and then it reoccurred in January of 1988, and then ended up going quickly, rapidly, until she passed away on February 1st, 1998. Now, because they wanted to redo the ending of this film, her death occurred before they could shoot the ending of this film. And then the team had to restructure and re-image using stand-in and body doubles. And one source claimed the original ending, which included Heather, was never shot because she died a week before they were scheduled to shoot the final pages. Heather tells me when I channeled her that for the entirety of this movie, first movie, second movie, third movie, there was something calling to her. Because she was a child, an innocent child on set, this thing had already latched onto her and just kept on feeding and feeding and feeding off of her. She might have had other illnesses throughout the time, but as she started to get older, this thing really latched on. I believe that this entity caused her death completely. This was just completely set up by it. And sadly, although she is not caught up with this entity, because of her unnatural death, because this was a paranormal death, she's kind of stuck to it to a degree. And also where they filmed. Perhaps maybe the set is no longer there, obviously, but that area, I would not be surprised if people see her walking through those hallways. She's still the same age when she died. She shows me that there was a lot of bad energy trying to get her to do things, and she shows me she had mischievous moments where she gave in. But the way she was feeling, she felt like she was dying from the inside out. She shows me that she felt so sick and no one believed her. And even the misdiagnosis, that was the entity fucking with the doctor. There's so much involved in this. It's unreal. She feels like she was never heard. She wanted off. I believe that the family didn't necessarily believe that there was a genuine entity around, which it is hard to believe if you're not into this kind of thing. So they just were like, no, honey, you got to get paid. You got to do your thing. You got a job. You got to work. And she was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she shows me she loves the movies. But this particular movie, the last movie specifically, she had zero interest in doing. And of course, she was going to get paid a lot more, but she didn't want to do it. And she shows me that entity, when it calls upon her, she comes. She can come. It's kind of freaky, actually. And that is why she's such an active spirit already. We've had a lot of activity with her in the house, which is why we're going to be doing a channeling session for you guys to see next week. The other thing I wanted to mention, Landon and I went to a horror con, and we actually saw the person who played the brother. His name is Oliver Robbins. He was there, and he played Robbie Freeling. Now, I went there trying to see if I could channel or see if there was anything attached to him, and there was not, thankfully. But from what I can see, this entity was more drawn to women. A lot of entities are. It is very rare for guys to get attached to these entities, but he paid no mind to it. I feel like there were some things that happened on set that was really, really freaky. So I believe that he experienced some things, but I don't feel like it attached itself to him. But if they kept going with this franchise, like if they decided to make a fourth and a fifth movie and they had him, you can bet your sweet ass he would have been a victim as well. But anyways, guys, that is everything I have for the Poltergeist movies. I feel like it's one of those really, really haunted movies. Even when watching it, I feel very haunted or connected to channeling Carol Ann. Even in the first few movies, she's like screaming through the screen to me, like, help me, help me, help me. It's actually so crazy. But it's also a classic, and I love the movie. Just the shitty, creepy things that happened around it. Anyways, guys, until next time, stay freaked out.